Let's play a game. The game is called, What Time Is It, Mr. Wolf? It's simple. The rules go as follows. Mr. Wolf, and only Mr. Wolf, can tell you what time it is. For whatever time he gives you, take a step. No matter what's in your way, keep moving forward. When Mr. Wolf calls, it's dinner time, run. Run away before you get on his plate. Whenever Mr. Wolf is watching over you, make sure you're hard at work. Continuously working is the only way to win this game. No one knows when Mr. Wolf's stomach calls, so make sure you move wisely. It's every man for themselves because don't forget, Mr. Wolf waits for no man. Let me model a practice round so you get the idea. What time is it, Mr. Wolf? It's 1 o'clock. Now take a step forward. Think you got the idea? Great, let's start with the real game. What time is it, Mr. Wolf? It's 7 o'clock. Time to awaken. Time to brush your teeth, make breakfast, get out the door, and get shaken. Great, you're all doing so well. Let's move on. What time is it, Mr. Wolf? It's 9 o'clock. Time to open up your notebooks and get right to work. Oh, you're having trouble? That's okay. You'll get right back on track. Let's keep moving forward for now. What time is it, Mr. Wolf? It's 1 o'clock. Your break finished a minute ago. Why aren't you at work yet? I told you, continuously working is the only way to win this game. Didn't you listen? What time is it, Mr. Wolf? It's 5 o'clock. Why are you leaving? Who said you could leave? The bell? Well, the bell doesn't dismiss you, does it? I do. Because you still have to make breakfast, get out the door, open up your notebook, start the math problem, and now you also have to clean the table, ask your classmate about this question, answer this next question. You're not done yet. Come on, it's 7 o'clock. You still have to start the math problem. Now you have to iron your shirt, put the kids to bed, put dinner on the table, call back your mom. How did you get under this deep? It's 10 o'clock. You still have so much to do before preparing for tomorrow. I know. It's because you didn't work as hard as Mr. Wolf did. Mr. Wolf, he clawed his way up to the top by scarfing down the prey he had craven, by the sweat of the immigrants who trekked far from home to build up this nation, a foreign meat marinated in hard work and determination, by the blood of a cheating hand betting nothing but lies, by the sweat of the ones who got halfway up the ladder, but bitten, chewed up, and spit out because their grit got them far, but not far enough. Drenched in the blood and the sweat and the tears of everyone but his own, Mr. Wolf is still hungry. He salivates as he entices you with the blood, the sweat, the tears glistening on him, scattered around him, and boom, he's got you trapped. Oh, you don't want to be eaten? Well, here's a tip for next time. We don't take a late slip. We already told you. It's every man for themselves. You said you were tired earlier? Well, that's perfect because you can get your 6 years of rest now that you're 6 feet under. What time is it, Mr. Wolf? It's dinner time. What you just heard is my adaptation of a piece that was presented at the Toronto International Festival of Authors earlier this year. It's a piece of spoken word, and it's titled, What Time Is It, Mr. Wolf? Of course, in my poem, the game takes on a bit of a different meaning, but the essence of it remains the same. Mr. Wolf tells you what time it is, and for whatever time you are given, the players take the respective steps forward. At any random point in the game, Mr. Wolf calls out, it's dinner time, and then the players are expected to run back to their starting position. The last person to make it back is eliminated, and the game repeats until there is only one person left standing. The last person left becomes Mr. Wolf, and the game repeats itself. Mr. Wolf is the authority. At first, he seems to be a lenient player who gives his players instructions. He even asks his players questions so that they stay comfortable. He gives them a second chance so that they can rebound. However, as the game progresses, Mr. Wolf also gets increasingly more aggressive. By the end of the game, he is no longer the encouraging and lenient authority figure he once was. Rather, he becomes a strict, almost dictatorial tyrant who shows no leniency to any of his players. So, who really is this Mr. Wolf guy? Well, he can be any authority you really wish. He could be a teacher, possibly a government official, maybe part of an administration team, or if we really wanted to get metaphorical, he could represent time itself. But from my perspective, Mr. Wolf is neither of those things. He is not one singular figure or one singular authority. Rather, he is the culmination of the driving force behind the issue I am here to present with you all today. Mr. Wolf represents the role of the US educational system in the amplification of economic disparity. Let me explain. This issue involves two elements. The first is the education itself. Simply put, our education system does not equip students with the knowledge they need to thrive in the real world. Research shows that Generation Z has the lowest financial literacy rate compared to Generation X and baby boomers, with barely 35% of our generation passing a basic financial literacy test. What is financial literacy? Well, according to the Jumpstart Coalition for Personal Financial Literacy, it can be described as the ability to use the knowledge of financial resources to lead a life of financial well-being and stability. Now, having this type of a financial literacy is crucial because it ensures that once kids leave schools and enter the workforce, they'll be able to manage their money as efficiently and as effectively as possible. So this leads me to the grand question here. How many of you all were enrolled in a mandatory personal finance class at school here in the United States? None of your hands are up. There seems to be a discrepancy here. It's important, but it's not taught. It's prevalent, but it's pushed to the background. This is exactly the problem that we need to address. Sure, kids learn about exponential growth and decay, but how many are taught about the stocks and the investments that model it in real life? All school children are expected to learn about geography, but what about the geopolitics that it affects in the real world today? Of course, geometry and the American Revolution are important, but what schools are currently lacking is real-world education. This involves, but is not limited to, personal finance. It also includes skills such as social-emotional learning or personal growth. These are topics that are rarely ever touched upon in this classroom. It's not just the material that's the problem, though. It's also the system that it revolves around. Mr. Wolf is not a lenient figure, and we know that by now. Even though he puts up a deceivingly patient facade at first, he later turns out to be a hard and strict figure who shows no mercy for his players. He has zero tolerance for any mistakes that are made in his game as he comes down to each minute and each movement of each player. Zero tolerance. How many of you have heard that phrase before? Chances are you've either read or heard or seen it at a school meeting or in a student handbook. These zero tolerance policies refer to the punishments that will ensue for infractions of school regulation. These policies are meant to filter out the student population and keep the students in check. However, are the effects of these really as positive as we want them to be? Well, let me walk through a scenario for you. If a student is in this situation, they'll be asked to leave. due to the expulsion on their transcript, pursuing a higher education such as attending university, going to college, or going to grad school is now severely more difficult. Due to this, getting a job is now out of the question, so what's left? Well, unemployment, minimum wage jobs. You see where I'm going here? The lack of financial education coupled with the instability of the education system itself proved to be a dangerous combination. Because what schools fail to realize is that when kids are pushed out of the schooling system and into the workforce without financial resources, complete education, or degree, they will be eaten alive by the workforce. Isolation and punishment are not the answers here. What we need to do as a society is challenge the status quo, or else this trend will only continue to proliferate. And right now, this challenge is exactly what the future of our youth needs most. Thank you.